All right, so here we are, chapter 3 in the White Wizzard story. We ended up, obviously, with my finding James J. LaRue and him completing the circle, so to speak, and the White Wizzard lineup was born. So basically from there, this is where we start to kind of get the band going. We start rehearsing, more material comes up. We start getting ready to get out there and reveal to the world who the band is. But the first thing we needed to do was name the band. And I remember we went to James's house and we were throwing a lot of names around. You know, getting four guys to agree on a name is it can be cumbersome. So we were all throwing names around, and I remember James Luna had wrote, we had talked about possibly doing some stuff in Spanish. We talked about actually being a band that does half English, half Spanish, because Luna was Mexican and there was a lot of interest in Latin America and heavy metal, and I thought it would be cool if we kind of did half and half, and Luna was kind of open to the idea. We'd actually talked about it pretty extensively those first couple of weeks when we were in the process of getting the band going. And I remember we thought of maybe some Spanish names too that would sound cool, and Luna had written, or someone had written on a piece of paper, Mago Blanco, and that was like magician, white magician. And I was like, what about White Wizzard? Like, I just thought it sounded cool. I was thinking in the spirit of Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, and of course Dio, right? Wizards and dragons. I was tapping into my junior high D&D nerd days from Catholic boys school, you know, when we played D&D all the time, Dungeons and Dragons, right? So the nerd side of me thought that would be a cool name. And I remember Luna had mentioned the band White, or just Wizzard from the 70s, and we thought it would be cool if it had two Z's like that band and not just one Z. ZZ Top, kind of a nod to them too. And that's how the band was named. We just kind of in the room, and everybody agreed that it was a cool name, and we thought we could have a cool mascot as a White Wizzard and make him cool, and it just seemed to make sense. So there you go. That was the end of it. I know a friend of the band's, I forget who it was, helped to design the lettering logo for us, and we were off and running. And LaRue and I were so serious. Like, of the four of us, LaRue and I were like super intense. Like, we were just all about it. And we, of course, were obsessed with Maiden. So LaRue and I had some money to spend, and I was working a pretty decent job at the time, pulling some money, and LaRue had some money at the time. And we were so serious. We wanted to invest and like try to make some really great strides to get the band noticed and to get the people to find us, because we felt like we're really good. We can make something here. Now we got to get out. We got to get heard, right? We felt like we had the look, the songs already, even with the four we were working on. And the other thing was LaRue felt like he needed to kind of improve his gear. He wanted to just get like a lights out setup. I already had my Ampeg rig and my Hamer bass and my Fender P bass. I had everything pretty dialed as far as my rig went. I'd been working really hard being a journeyman bassist to kind of get to that point. And LaRue felt like his equipment wasn't quite up to snuff. So he went to Guitar Center. And I remember I had a hookup at Guitar Center at the time from all of those years hanging out at the store. And I could get stuff from him like just above Guitar Center's cost. This was back in the days when this could still happen. That doesn't happen anymore. But then in 2007, a guy named Sidney that worked there, he was like the #1 sales guy in the country, but he just would, it was all, he'd get his bonuses based on bulk moved. So he would sell shit to people for super cheap. So he'd just get a bulk of sales for the whole month or whatever, and get these fat bonuses. So I was one of the many beneficiaries of that. So I took James LaRue down there, and I was like, bro, like, I told LaRue I thought that the Soldano SLO 100 would be the amp to get. I'm a super fan of that amp and its voicing for the type of metal that we were trying to do, you know, A440, humbuckers. It's just really got a sound, that amp. It just sparkles and sits in a mix really well. And has this really cool top end. So, you know, we basically, I'm going to start here again. It sits in a mix really well and has this great top end. So basically, I took LaRue down and he played the amp, and we also were scanning. He wanted to get a flying V for that look and that vibe, and I liked it too. I wanted him to have kind of a Michael Schenker vibe because he had the blonde hair. So I was like, there was a Gibson V that was on the wall, and he was like, that one looks cool. And I was like, yeah, I'd take that one down. And he played it, and it felt good. It had some good tone to it, and it sounded good to me. And then he played it through the Soldano SLO, and it was like the heavens opened, you know, the whole cliche. It was like, that was the sound, man. I was like, dude, that's it. And he was like, well, what can your boy do? Because those are really expensive. So Sydney was able to work him a really good deal on the head and cab and the flying V. And he needed LaRue. They were working on the deal. So I went and picked up the V. And I was like jamming on it, and I really liked it. And I was going through the SLO while LaRue was working on the deal at the cash register with my guy and paying, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, these riffs came out of me. And it basically was Red Desert Skies. It was the opening riff, the pre-chorus, the verse, all those parts, and a bit of the bridge. And I literally just came out of me. Sometimes songs happen like that. I started riffing on it, I'm playing the riffs, and I did the, and it just, that guitar and that rig, just sometimes you get on something that inspires a song, especially if you're a songwriter. It's amazing how like changing a tuning, all of a sudden you write like 3 songs, like a certain tone, a certain instrument, you can be inspired by it. And that was just one of those moments. It was like, boom, this song comes out of me. And when LaRue got back from the cash register, I'm all, check this out. And he's like, dude, that's fucking killer. And I'm like, yeah, let's take this back to the rehearsal studio and we'll work out like a chorus for it, because it still needed a chorus and like a little bit more in the bridge part and like a lead break part. So I remember we had to go to the other Guitar Center to pick up the cabinet. And then we went back to the rehearsal studio. And I remember right away I plugged in my Ampeg. He plugged that in. And we're getting tones on the thing, and it sounded killer. And then we start working on that. I taught LaRue the riffs, just like March of the Skeletons and the other songs. He learned them, and of course played them like a fucking machine. And then we worked out that chorus. And I remember I was like, I could hear kind of an Achilles' Last Stand riff. And that's when LaRue came up with that down, 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 that chord. I was kind of like, yeah, maybe. And so we both discussed the chord, and it just came out. And then I did the bass line underneath it, and it was like, and then I got that vocal melody kind of already starting. It ended up being refined later, but the na 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 na, and it was like, you know, or the beginnings of that. It might not have been that entirely, but we knew that space, there was this vocal melody, and it kind of had this descending, and I remember we were kind of melodically messing with it, LaRue and I, in the rehearsal room, and we thought it was great, man. We couldn't wait to show it to the guys. And Luna and Tyler came down, and we worked it out. And LaRue had his rig, and I had mine, and it sounded really good. Like, it was like the mix was really killer, and we knew we had like all the pieces in place. And actually, I take that back. I got my Ampeg rig a little later. At first, I was playing a Mesa Boogie 400 Plus. That I eventually ended up getting an Ampeg SVT VR vintage reissue that was a little bit better a little bit later. So just for the gear thing, because people might see me playing in the early going in those first shows. I'm actually playing a Mesa Boogie through an Ampeg 810 cabinet. And then so it was a Mesa Boogie 400 Plus, Ampeg 810. I had one pedal, which was a Brassmaster kind of pedal for distortion for the GTO breakdown and a couple other parts. And then LaRue had the Soldano SLO 100 half stack and his Flying V. I had my Hammer Blitz bass. I had a P bass too, but I played that in the studio. But live, I was playing that Hammer Blitz because it had a great mid-range. And that was it, man. That was the sound. We then had those 5 songs, which we were calling Iraq Attack at the time, that new song. It ended up being Red Desert Skies. I wrote a good amount of the lyrics for that. That came later. And then basically from there, we started prepping to do shows, and we needed a couple more songs. And we had a cover. We were doing a song called Hollywood Tease by Girl. from their debut record, a classic New Wabam band from 1980 on Jet Records. That was pretty fun to play, and we were digging it. And I remember LaRue had a demo he had called Atomic Explosion of some instrumental stuff. And he gave it to me. He's like, hey, if a song idea comes out of you, here it goes. He gave me the demo to the song. And I was like, this is freaking great. And it had this cool, like, breakdown thing with clean guitars. And so I came up with a bass line for it and kind of thought of what the arrangement should be. And everything sans the chorus, we sat down. This is a song that became a song called Into the Night. We got it together instrumentally. We worked out the chorus, LaRue, Luna, and myself in the studio later with the Donna, like the pause parts for Into the Night. But everything else we worked out there in the studio, and we started jamming on that, and it was really cool. And then we come to song number 7. When I went up to Luna and Tyler's place, they'd been jamming on a couple of riffs that I don't know if there was another band called Trigger Renegade, and I think they'd been jamming with some of those guys, and they'd recorded it, and it kind of had some cool riffs on it, pockets that were kind of more stoner rocky, but I liked it, and I was like, well, what's that? And it's like, oh, that's just something we were working on. And I was like before, they weren't sure what they were going to do when they joined up with me, and when I was listening to it, I was like, you should let LaRue and me mess with this. I think we could really come up with some stuff on it. So we took those initial jams, and LaRue and I sat down and we basically structured this this song, and I structured all the bass lines and the way it should vibe, and LaRue structured the guitar against it. And then all of a sudden I watched LaRue basically, you know, sometimes you just watch certain musicians do magic things. I watched him right before my eyes come up with the repeating hook on High Speed GTO over that bass hook, and then the guitar solo for that song, and also we worked out that whole middle part, the breakdown. I think we were sitting in Luna's room at the time with microcubes, and I was like, man, what the fuck is this? Like, it was just so hooky, and that was all. I mean, I love the bass line I played on that song, but that was James J. LaRue right there. Like, that to me is just an amazing alchemy of guitar playing that came out of James J. LaRue on that song. The hooks in all of the solo work on that song and also on the breakdown are just unfrickin' real, man. What a phenomenal guitar player. And I remember thinking at that moment, everything else we had was killer. But that's when I was like, man, this is going to be real special. Because just, again, the chemistry between LaRue and I continued to grow. We were so locked tight. We were so aligned. Now, at the same time, LaRue and I were the ones investing in the band. We were you know, doing all this stuff. And I remember LaRue and I spent $3,000. We hunted down Derek Riggs from Iron Maiden, the guy that did Eddie. He was still doing art, and he wanted $3,000 to do a piece for us. We wanted him to do a White Wizzard, but we had some ideas of how we wanted it to be, but we wanted it to be Riggs. You know, we felt like, how do you make a splash? Well, hire Derek Riggs, right? I mean, hire the guy that did Eddie. I mean, the band's in the spirit of Maiden and Priest. Why not? And of course, we were fanboys, and you know, when you're a big fan, that obviously, you know, helps in that regard as far as, you know, the dynamic of you know, being excited and everything. We were kind of wide-eyed, right? So we did that. Was it the best place to put $3,000 looking back? Probably not. And I know the other guys were kind of like surprised that we did that, but we wanted to make a splash, and we were serious. So, and I do remember after we'd put the music together, we were starting to throw lyrics around, and we all kind of brought stuff to the table on the lyrics. I know Red Desert Skies, Octane Gypsy, a lot were mine. Celestina was actually titled when I did the demo, and I had lyrics for it that ended up being changed because Luna wasn't really feeling them. But it was we kept the name because it was about a girl I'd gone on a date with. It was like a super, super tragic date. It was terrible. It went as bad as it could be. She worked in my building at the time when I was kind of working in the corporate world in the mid 2000s there. I think it was around 05 or 06 when I went on a date with her about a year or two before White Wizzard. But her name was Celestina. And I was like, that's like the coolest name ever. That'd make a great name for a song, you know? So when I'd had that hook riff forever from Celestina, well before then, the da-na-da-na-na-na-na-na, and I just, Celestina, that's going to be the name of that song. It was like it was, that hook and that name went together, and that's all I knew. And when I completed the demo, I said, we're calling this Celestina, you know, and here's some lyric ideas, and then they got reworked later. But, you know, I remember Megalodon, LaRue had a lot to do with those lyrics because he was really into dinosaurs and prehistoric sharks. So, you know, I remember the original thing LaRue was singing back to us in the rehearsal room when we were throwing ideas around for the lyrics. He's like, denizen of creepy seas, born of ancient depths of sea, Megalodon, you know, and it was real robotic going along with the riffs, and we were like, no, we can't do that. And eventually the lyrics were put together, but those were mostly LaRue. I remember specifically being with Luna at his house. We had watched the live Twisted Sister from like 1984 at his house, and I was talking about the song Little GTO. I wanted to write a song about my car, and we should shoot a video in it, like Breaking the Law, ironically. And you know, we came up with the name High Speed GTO. We even threw some lyric ideas back and forth, and the next morning Luna had stayed up and refined all that, and he emailed me and he's like, dude, I think this is the lyric. And I was like, dude, that's killer. So, you know, it was one of those things where the cool thing about High Speed GTO, of all the songs on that, not only is it the strongest song on the EP, but and one of the best songs we ever did, but it's, and probably one of the best songs that came out in that, if not the best, in that entire new wave of traditional heavy metal movement. I mean, it's a hell of a song. We outdid ourselves on that one, and everybody brought something to the table. Even Tyler with that intro, you know, that iconic drum intro, in the breakdown and stuff. It was just everybody brought their A game. Though I think the star of the show on High Speed GTO is James LaRue. I just don't know if I've heard a song that's a single that has better. I mean, it's up there with Reelin' in the Years. There's certain songs that just have guitar hooks that are iconic. I mean, is there a more iconic guitar riff than the turnaround of GTO? And then that solo at the end is just stupid, amazing, stupid, good. Just phenomenal. I mean, I can't say enough things about it. So a very collaborative song, that song. That was all of us working together and showed the potential, I think, of what we all could have done had we continued on a trajectory of all being lockstep in the vision on the same page. Sadly, that's not where it ended up. But at that time, we were super excited and we knew we had something. And Luna and I were both obsessed with the Diamond Head Lightning to the Nations EP. And I remember us kind of thinking like, yeah, 7 songs, it'll be like that. Let's record, it would be an EP, you know. Of course, it was the High Speed GTO EP, right? In a lot of ways, there are correlations between those, I think, looking back on it now, as far as the new wave of British heavy metal and then the new wave of traditional heavy metal. In a lot of ways, I feel like High Speed GTO was kind of like a cross between that or the first Maiden album, you know, in those veins, in the spirit of all those bands, really. It was a hell of an EP that we had written, and we knew it was good. So we had to go in and record it. And James, Paul Luna, and Tyler had been friends with a guy named Chris Rakestraw from their recordings in Jet Fuel. Now, he was a guy that worked with Danzig, a little bit with Slayer, bands like that, heavier bands. And, you know, I was a little reserved about going in with them because my attitude when I started White Wizzard, and I was very upfront about this with everybody, was I want to get away from the thrash and the heavy and the gray of metal. The whole idea was to put the good times back in metal. Good times overdrive. That's what I would say. Chris Nabb in Jet Fuel nicknamed me Good Times because that was always my thing. Like, good times, baby. Good times overdrive. GTO, right? Tied in with my car. The whole idea. Let's bring the good times back into metal. You know, that feeling you get when you listen to Fair Warning in a drop top going to the beach. You know what I mean? That's what I was going for with White Wizzard. That's what I wanted. That first time you heard Power Slave and Aces High came across your fucking speakers and you were air guitaring. That was the idea. what got me into music, the love of it. That was always the only mentality with White Wizzard. It's ironic that it's turned into such a soap opera, because really at its core, it was formed out of this massive passion for music and the love of that kind of music. So, you know, we went into the studio with this guy, Chris Rakestraw, and he did a good job tracking it, but he started kind of saying things to Luna and Tyler like, oh, I think the songwriting's very junior high. It needs to be heavier. It needs to be this. And they really kind of respected that guy, and they were kind of letting what he said to them affect them. And I disagreed, of course. I was very resolute in my fearlessness and also what the band should sound like. And I felt like, you know, these were the 7 songs that we had it, you know. And he actually brought a guy in named Matt, who had worked with Slayer, that he wanted to try to like rewrite our songs. And I remember a very poignant moment out to dinner after a rehearsal with James, Paul, and Tyler and LaRue. All of us were there. And James, Paul, and Tyler were kind of trying to talk me into having this guy come in and rewrite some stuff because Chris had said we should, and that he thought some of the songwriting was quote unquote junior high level. Anyway, I said no, and I still believe I was right. I was very resolute. I said, we're not a boy band. We aren't going to have people rewrite our songs. What we've got is what we've got. And they still talked me into letting the guy come down, and he made a couple suggestions, and it was just kind of like whatever, and he left. And, you know, I think Chris Rakestraw could see that I wasn't going to budge. It's one of those things where sometimes producers, they want to kind of take over a project, and I was really in control of the project, and I think he could see that, and we were starting to, you know, butt heads a little bit. So we tracked the whole EP. It went great. James, Luna, I remember when we went in, LaRue and I were a little nervous because Luna, you know, we had a bunch of ideas all of us had brought to the table lyrically and vocal melody wise, but it was all in pieces, and Luna was kind of not showing up for some rehearsals right before we went in, and we were nervous about it. And he went in with that guy, Matt, later and recorded the vocals without us there. He wanted to kind of do it by himself with all the ideas we'd all come up together. And that producer did, I will give him credit, help guide James, Luna into the final product. He does deserve credit for that. A guy named Matt Hyde, he did help Luna reach his potential, because I remember when we went in, we weren't sure if we were ready because I wasn't sure if Luna was there yet. So, you know, when we listened to the final product on the vocals, we'd all contributed to what the vocals were going to be and the lyrics, and Luna came out and he'd done it. I mean, you've heard it. It's as it was. Phenomenal. James Paul Luna became James Paul Luna throughout the process of the formation of White Wizzard to that point. When I heard what he'd sang, all right, this is cool. Now, we obviously were going to have to do it live, which ended up being a bit of a struggle. But basically, at least at first, Chris Rakestraw tried to mix one song, Megalodon, and it wasn't working for us. He just came from the wrong background. And I had known Ralph Patlin. He'd been working with Michael Schenker and worked with Megadeth, and I'd worked with him on other projects. I knew he was perfect for it. And LaRue wasn't happy with the mix. I wasn't happy with the mix. Rakestraw was kind of like, I know you're going to take this to someone else and have him mix it anyway. And we just weren't really getting on, and the vision of the band was just not, my vision and his vision for what it should be were just different. And I know James and Tyler were Luna and Tyler were very affected by that to a point. And so it started to kind of create that rift of like, I think they were thinking, oh, we need to be heavier, we need this, we need other people to come write our stuff, maybe it's not good enough. And I was like, no, it's good enough. This is the shit. This is what White Wizzard's supposed to be. So I was resolute in the vision, they were wavering a bit. This guy was kind of saying this, that, they had people in their ear. This happens a lot in bands, happens in relationships. So it got a little weird there, And I remember James, LaRue, and I talked to Ralph. I got Ralph on the phone, and he was working in a studio with this really killer SSL console. And I said, dude, we could both afford $500 each. Would you mix this EP for us? I know you can kill it. And he's like, look, I'll do it on an overnight session when I can get in the studio for cheap. I'll do it. And he did it. He did that. He mixed that EP. I give him credit, in like 15 hours, he said, just a marathon overnight session, and sent it back to us, man. And it's as you have heard it. That's what he did. And absolutely phenomenal. And LaRue and I remember we heard it and we were so excited. We're like, oh my God, Ralph mixed the shit out of this, you know. And we sent it to Luna and Tyler and they didn't like it. And that's what became a really, really tough situation. Was Tyler was just starting to learn Pro Tools, and like he thought he could do a better job than Ralph Patlin, who had just got done working with Megadeth and had tracked UFO and Shanker and Korn. And I'm like, dude, like this guy's a pro. This is on multi-million-dollar equipment, and the mix is killer. It's super clear. It's amazing. Tyler and Luna wanted to make it sound like a garage band. I don't know what the hell they were going for, but Tyler basically won the argument, at least in the interim, to give him a chance to mix it too. Like, we're not going to use those. Give me a chance to mix it. And Luna wanted that too. It was a weird thing where it was like, oh my God, LaRue and I were so excited about these mixes, and now all of a sudden the other two guys in the band don't like it. And the drummer, who's got very little experience, wants to mix it. And that became kind of a real bone of contention between Tyler and I, especially. He started sending mixes to me, and they just weren't cutting the mustard. I remember we were bringing a new guitar player into the band named Mike Clemente, and I would take him off, or LaRue and some other friends in the industry, and compare the mixes from Ralph with what Tyler was sending me, and they were just like, why is this even being argued? You know, that the Ralph Patlin mixes are, that's the shit, that's it, that's the sound. I'm like, I know. And Luna and Tyler wouldn't really budge on it. And Tyler kind of had a grudge with me over the fact that I was really just saying, dude, this ain't working. It was almost like he was kind of getting upset at me that I didn't like what he was doing. And I wasn't trying to disrespect him, but I know I was right, because the EP, as you've heard, it is Ralph Patlin's mix. I mean, it speaks for itself. It's phenomenal. And I fought very hard for that. And what ended up happening was, stunningly enough, is Tyler didn't want me to make the songs public and wanted to continue to keep throwing mixes at me. And I finally just said, you know what, I just posted them on MySpace, 4 songs: High Speed GTO, Celestina, March of the Skeletons, and Red Desert Skies. I put those 4 songs on the MySpace page, which is, this is pre-really Facebook. I mean, this is 07, right? So I put them up. That was the band's website at the time. And, you know, it was like, we're a new band, blah, 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 put it out there. And immediately we started getting the attention of people. One was a manager guy who didn't end up working out, but we signed on with him briefly. But a couple weeks after the songs were put up, even though Tyler was mad at me for doing it, it was a smart move, because we got a call from a guy named Davey Voorhees, who had moved to Los Angeles with one goal in mind, and it was to make classic heavy metal videos, and he was looking for his band to do it with. And there we were, right in front of him, and he was blown away by us. He loved all the songs. LaRue and I agreed to meet him, because LaRue and I did everything back then. So we went to Starbucks and met Davey Voorhees, and I showed up at Starbucks in the 69 GTO. We were kind of torn between Celestina and GTO as being the first song to do a video for. We were going to do several originally. And Davey was like, dude, I was like, yeah, I'd already been talking about doing a Breaking the Law style video in the car. We had High Speed GTO. Really, the idea for the lyric for the song was born out of the idea of doing a video for it. It was meant to be. So Davey said, look, I'm going to go write a concept, and let's, he was really serious. He's like, I'm going to do this. I'll go out of pocket. I'll do it all for free. I just want to, you know, write the concept, and I want to cast the people in it. So Davey wrote this great concept. We read through it. We loved it, which ended up being the High Speed GTO video. And then we ended up, LaRue, myself, and Davey, all these people came. He did a thing on lacasting.com, and they came and read in these casting rooms, and that's where the Witch, the Wizard, and Gorak, the troll guy, were ultimately found. They came and read for us, and we loved them. And I remember LaRue and Davey had their laptops set up, and we took it very seriously. You know, it was really cool. It was so much fun. What a fun time that was. And, you know, LaRue and Tyler had seen the concept. We'd talk about it at rehearsals and stuff. Really, it was like everybody was excited, you know, and it was like, this is going to be fun. And that's where I'm going to leave the end of chapter 3. That's the High Speed GTO EP story. It's recording. It's ultimately getting out there, and its creation. And part 4, the last chapter of the High Speed GTO lineup, we'll talk about the making of the video and the subsequent sliding downhill that was rooted in some of the things I told you in part 3. So chapter 4 coming next.